days after the storm, farmers were able to go and access seed that they had grown, seed that they knew was open pollinated, and seed that they could immediately go back and rebuild their farms with. And so what we have heard from that is that seed library that they built is providing a real need, right? And that's a need not only in a typhoon, that's a need during a global pandemic. That's a need during future droughts. That's a need during next typhoon. Always been the missing piece in our time in the Philippines, right? I mean, if I even reflect back to like my early Peace Corps days, what did the folks at Enka Farm, our founding farm, always want? Was open pollinated local seed, because all that was available in the farm supply stores was not that, was hybrid, was chemically treated. And so said, okay, we want to be more vigorous, in quotes, with our growing systems. Okay, so we're going to introduce monocrops. We're going to introduce high yielding crops that are only thinking about one cycle of yield. They're only thinking about that one planting cycle. When farmers and people in agriculture know you have to have the long, this isn't going to happen, but if for some reason we could never go back to Tublai, that's not going to happen. But if it did, I know that they're good, because those farmers have built a sovereign seed system for themselves. And most importantly, they're all now saving. So that's the Percy case, you know, it's the company was trying to control the seed that blew into his yard because nature blew it in there, because we in this country have allowed the patenting of life. We've allowed the patenting of seeds. So, you know, I think that what we are about is restoring that sovereign system.
Welcome to the Seed Podcast. My name is Rowena Suarez. I am your host, and I am bringing you conversations and stories about initiatives, projects, and advocacies that are giving birth to a new world. A better world, you can say. Yes, the world as we know it is crumbling and in disarray, but there is also a new world that is being born. I believe that there is hope, and that in each one of us is a seed that has been planted for us to grow and nurture. We are the seeds that have been planted to transform the world. My guest for today is Sherry Manning. She is the founder and U.S. Executive Director of Global Seed Savers. Sherry's work in the Philippines began 15 years ago when she served as a Peace Corps volunteer, and she was fortunate enough to be assigned to the town of Tublai in Benguet Province and the loving Cosalan family as her host family, where she lived and worked for 2.5 years. Sherry is also a daughter, sister, and very proud auntie, or anta, as her 5-year-old nephew calls her. And she has always been passionate about ending injustices, spending quality time in the natural places she advocates for, and building deep and meaningful relationships with her community. When not working for the Global Seed Savers and serving on various nonprofits boards, Sherry can be found playing in the beautiful Colorado mountains, hiking, fly fishing, and more. That's very exciting. Thank you, Sherry, for being here. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Wang. And any opportunity to share about our work is positive. So we appreciate the format.
Great. So, Sherry, I remember the first time I read the words Global Seed Savers. And I think that was when I saw a friend post a photo at Kai Farms. And I think it said something like they just had a seed school with Global Seed Savers. And when I read the words Global Seed Savers, I remember being amazed. And I said, oh, wow, so people can really come together and start saving seeds. And I was in the GMO Free Cebu movement at the time. So that was really quite exciting for me. And I know that some of our listeners probably don't have an idea yet about what seed saving is all about. So maybe we can start with you sharing with us what a seed saver does and who can be seed savers.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good question, and I think maybe the initial answer that people would want or be drawn to is perhaps the actual technical know-how of saving a seed.
Mm.
Um, but I think that for us and for me, I define being a seed saver as much bigger than that. But on a very basic level, in the world of plants, anything that flowers produces a seed,
Mm.
right? And seeds are nature's way of teaching us that things are regenerative. Seeds literally are designed to be planted time and time again, or at least they are if they're open pollinated, right? And
Mm.
I can get more into what that means and the difference. And in the very short time span of the last really just 30 to 40 years, how human control of nature and in seeds is changing some of that. But at a very fundamental level, seed saving is about allowing any plant that flowers to reproduce that seed and then replanting it. And sometimes that requires us coming in and saving it and drying it and replanting it. Sometimes nature takes care of it for us.
Mm.
Corn is a great example. Corn is wind pollinated, and it will move and spread its seed via the winds. We have a pine tree variety here in Colorado. It's actually a relative of the pines that were brought into the Philippines by Spaniards. That the only way that their seeds spread is through fire. The natural process of a fire is what opens the pine cone and allows the seed to reseed.
Mm.
So there's a lot of examples in nature of things being regenerative, and that's really what seeds are. Seeds teach us to allow nature's process to be regenerative. And then the answer of, who can be a seed saver, anyone can be a seed saver, really. Anyone can. And I think, I was just recently giving a presentation to our domestic partners and a seed school teacher training, just sharing about our work in the Philippines. And here's the thing, there's lots of entry points in this work. So while our frontline farmers are really the ones on the ground saving seeds,
Mm.
I think they are the heroes and the heroines of this work, right? But we all have a role to play, right? So I have dabbled myself in a little bit of seed saving, but part of my role of being a seed saver is being an advocate and educating myself about why this is important and then sharing with more people why it's important. So the short answer is anyone can be a seed saver, because it's not just about growing a plant, allowing it to go to seed, saving those seeds and replanting it. It's about educating yourself about why this entire ecosystem matters and is important.
Having said that, Sherry, so can we share with our listeners why it is important to be saving seeds? I know in the past I never really bothered to save seeds, and I haven't really thought of it as, something that people should be doing. I mean, maybe because we had the abundance of agricultural crops in the Philippines. Yeah, why is it important to save seeds?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, again, just to reiterate, seeds are the most self replicating system we have. Literally built into their DNA is the ability to reproduce and become more vigorous over time.
Mm.
And so that's an essential thing to restore to our agricultural practices, because in the last 30 to 40 years, what has happened to our agricultural practices is we've tried to tamper with that process.
Mm.
Large biochemical corporations have come in and said, you know what, we want to quote unquote grow more food. And I know it's a podcast, but I'm putting quotes in the air as we're on Zoom. We want to grow more food. And so we're going to hybridize our seeds. We're going to chemically tamper with the quality and natural process of seeds, all under the guise of maybe feeding a growing population. But what have we seen in the last 30 to 40 years? We haven't seen hunger cases go down. In fact, we've seen more and more environmental destruction from our chemical agriculture industry. So seed saving and allowing seeds to go back and do what they're meant to do, which is to be planted, to be stewarded, to be loved, and to be replanted time and time again, is the only way to ensure resilience and ensure we can continue to move through all of the challenges that we're continuing to face as a world, which one of those is our challenge with food distribution. And I can dive into a lot more of that, but the biochemical industry has taken over our agriculture system, and countries like the Philippines are being really heavily impacted by that. I mean, it's happening around the world, but smaller nations in particular are really being impacted, and it's not to the benefit of all of us as humanity or us as a planet.
What are the known issues that you know that has something to do with probably a dwindling number of seeds that can be replanted? I'm sure that's something that would really add value if our listeners learn about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the biggest just historical processes that happened is the quote unquote green revolution of the 1970s. So in the 1970s, was really the rise of this quote unquote green revolution, again, to try to grow more monocrops, right? So rising populations in countries like the Philippines, really all over the world, rising populations, issues with food distribution, not issues with actual food quantity, because it's actually a distribution and an equity issue. It's not a quantity of food issue, in my opinion. So companies came in and said, okay, we want to be more vigorous, in quotes, with our growing systems. Okay, so we're going to introduce monocrops. We're going to introduce high yielding crops that are only thinking about one cycle of yield. They're only thinking about that one planting cycle. When farmers and people in agriculture know you have to have the long view in this work, right? Because each time you plant, it's telling you a story for the next planting cycle, right? And so I think that that's really one of the biggest issues. And I think that, our mentors here in the US call it being the people of the pinch, right? Because seed savers are people of the pinch, because we pinched our biodiversity over the last 30 to 40 years down to this small moment. We're in this pinch point, but we haven't lost all of it, right? And that's the beautiful thing that we're learning as we're helping communities return to saving seeds. All of our partner farmers have stories that are their own, that are their grandparents, that are their parents, of the native seeds that they used to steward, right? And so again, there's a real opportunity now to bring this back and to do it better. But the main reason that has been taken away is frankly a lot of greed, and a lot of short-sightedness when you think about the global issues around feeding a population and feeding the world.
Beautiful. Thank you for enlightening us on that, Sherry. Where in the Philippines do we have communities of seed savers?
Well, I cannot tell you everywhere where people are saving seeds, because I'm certain that people are doing it all over the Philippines. I will tell you where we as global seed savers have a presence. But I'm certain that maybe people listening to this podcast and other communities around the Philippines are saving seeds. And if you are, and you don't know who we are, we would love to be connected with you, because we're really trying to be a coalition builder of people and communities in the Philippines that are invested in saving seeds, and to help make those connections for people. So our founding community of seed savers is in Tublad, Benguet, where I served as a Peace Corps volunteer. We, in 2016, launched an organization there called the Benguet Association of Seed Savers. It's a farmers association that the farmers launched. We helped them do it. And it actually has 20 members that represent 4 different municipalities of Benguet, but it's hubbed in Tublai, because that's also where our founding seed library is. So there's the Bass in Tublai, And then in 2017, and actually I think how we connected was through Cebu Farmers Market and Cafe I,
Mm-hmm.
Community Alternatives for Food Ecosystems Initiative. We've been working with them since 2017, and we have formed a community of seed savers throughout Cebu. So there's about 15 farmers throughout Cebu that are members of the Cebu Seed Savers. And we have a seed library that we co-manage with Cafe I in Cebu City. And then, as you said, we've held seed schools over the years in different regions of the country. We've held a number of them at Kai Farms. Kai Farms has their own very robust and active seed saving program under Carla and Amina and all of their farmers' leadership. We have held a seed school in Mountain Province, and there is now their own seed library at Layog Farm in Tajan, Mountain Province. And then we've also partnered with a lot of different communities. Most recently, last year, we held an online seed school with an NGO in Siargao called Local. And they work with farmers all over Siargao, and they're very actively wanting to engage more in saving seeds. So it is a growing movement. I'm certain that there are seed savers in other places that I did not mention.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
from a global seed savers perspective in the Philippines, those are our main kind of community areas. And then we've worked very closely with the Philippine Permaculture Association, helped inspire incorporating seed saving into their permaculture curriculum. And I believe that Cabio Kid in Nueva Ecija now has an active seed library as well. So.
Beautiful. It's really wonderful to see how these collaborations have really allowed the global seed savers to grow exponentially.
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, and actually one of your guests that was just on your podcast, Asha, she's doing some incredible seed saving work at her farm in Batangas. I believe it's Batangas.
Yes, Batangas. Batangas.
Batangas, yeah. So
Yeah.
she's another one, all kind of in this sphere, but we're not directly working with, but follow her work very closely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sherry, you mentioned the seed library. Can you give us a picture of how a seed library works? Is it like a physical, like a library with books where you borrow books and then you sign something and then you return it a few days or weeks after? Is it like
Yeah,
that?
kind of Wang. It's I'll describe our founding seed library, which is very much that. So it's kind of a large bookshelf at the municipal agriculture office in Tublai, and instead of books, it's seeds, right? And we really we have taken a lot of cues from one of the world's greatest seed heroines, Vandana Shiva. The principle in the seed libraries that she has helped inspire and create all over India are to ensure that they are also regenerative. So farmers can grow out seed, and then they return seed to the seed library. And then if farmers want to check out seed, they can, but the rule is they return twice as much, right, to help with that sustainability. So right now, the seed library in Tublai, all of the active growers for that library are the members of the Benguet Association of Seed Savers. So about 20 active growers. I believe we're up to right around 60 different varieties of seed that have been produced in the greater Benguet area. And yes, the vision with a seed library like that, it's short-term storage. It's not a seed vault. It's not a seed bank. It's a seed library. So the vision is that the seeds are getting grown out at least annually, but that there's quite a bit of movement. So yeah, it works like a book library. You check out seed, you return seed, and it allows a community resource to remain intact and to multiply.
So these people who are participating in the borrowing of seeds or participating in this seed library practice, what do they say about the experience?
Yeah, well, I wish some of our farmers could be here to say it themselves, but I'm always happy to do my best to represent. I think one of the biggest things that we have learned over the years with these seed libraries, and very much so as nature teaches us, sometimes you learn the most when things are the hardest, right? So in 2018, we founded the seed library in 2017 in Tublai. But in 2018, Typhoon Mangkhut hit the northern region, And as many of your listeners, and as you well know, the Philippines is the most climate vulnerable nation.
Mhm.
It's often hammered with typhoons every year. In fact, I was reading recently, last year was the first year of lower typhoon numbers in over a decade in the Philippines. So it's almost like Mother Nature was giving the Philippines a breath because
Mm.
there were plenty of other challenges happening, perhaps.
Right.
Anyways, bit of a tangent, but so all of our farmers in Benguet were impacted by the storm, lost their crops, and sadly, that's something that they're actually very accustomed to, right? They know that annually sometimes that's going to happen, but the seed library remained intact. The seed library was not damaged. The seed
Mm.
library remained intact, and so literally days after the storm, farmers were able to go and access seed that they had grown, seed that they knew was open pollinated, and seed that they could immediately go back and rebuild their farms with. And so what we have heard from that is that seed library that they built is providing a real need, right?
Mm.
And that's a need not only in a typhoon, that's a need during a global pandemic. That's a need during future droughts. That's a
Mm.
need during next typhoon. So that to us was a real example of, hey, like this is essential. Every barangay should have a seed library.
Mm. I agree.
Hard stop,
Yeah.
because that is what's going to allow communities to remain resilient and to continue to grow their own sustenance and not be dependent on all of these broken systems, right? So I think that that's a really big thing. And I think another thing that is often hard to quantify but is a real thing that's happened in particular with the Bass group as they've been together for quite some time is they've really built a family amongst themselves. So, these are farmers from the same province, some of them from the same municipalities. Some of them knew each other, some of them didn't. But part of our model pre-COVID is doing field visits,
Mm.
is helping, kind of build community amongst the seed savers. And they really feel that amongst themselves. After that typhoon, the text messages that they were getting from each other were, how is your family? Are you safe? Are you okay? And they wanted to help share and exchange and help each other, rebuild. So I think that the community that can be built through this work is equally as powerful as the seeds that are planted and saved.
How has the COVID-19 situation affected the way you operate? I mean, Global Seed Savers itself.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think, like any humans and any organization, we've all been impacted by the last 16 months, 17 months. I don't know how many months we're up to now. I think at a very basic fundamental level, our on the ground, hands-on work had to stop immediately
Mm.
for the safety of our farmers, for the safety of our staff, and with travel restrictions, we are just cut off, not able to move physically anymore. However, the other thing that has come from the pandemic is this reawakening, really across the world, but I'll just speak to the Philippines, of communities across the Philippines as their supply chains were cut off, as especially I think folks in urban areas are realizing that they're actually very food insecure.
Mm. True.
It's the urban areas, right? Our farming communities have food security and hopefully even food sovereignty. So I think on a positive note, it has really emboldened our work. I would say in the last year, people are banging down our door to work and to engage with us because people are intrigued. People want to go back to this practice. People have a deep personal connection to saving seeds and to ensuring food sovereignty for their communities. So just real quick, one way that we kind of shifted and pivoted our work was that very early on in the pandemic, our Philippine executive director Karen, who's based in Baguio, was really, I think, sitting at home and feeling a little bit like, what am I going to do now? Like, I can't travel to Tublai. I'm concerned. I know there's this great growing need for food access. I know that our farmers in Benguet have a ton of excess food and they've now lost those markets. What do we do? And Karen, through her wonderful networking and relationship building, was able to call up some large NGOs in Manila that we had built relationships with and say, if we can get you food from Tuglay produce, would your partners in Manila need it?
Mm.
And all of them said, absolutely. And so that morphed into this wonderful initiative that we call Iduyan, which is an Ibaloy word. There's not really a good translation. It's close to Bayanihan. It's a mutual exchange. It's a mutual exchange. And so that program ended up supplying tons and tons and tons of vegetables to folks in Metro Manila who otherwise wouldn't have access, and frankly didn't have access on a good day, let alone during the pandemic. And then it also maintained a livelihood train for the farmers in Benguet.
Mm.
So those farmers continued to get paid for their produce. The produce didn't go to waste, and it benefited folks in the metro area that needed access to healthy food. And that's a good example. We're not a food relief organization. We really believe in starting from the seed on up. We're
Mm.
a more longer term sustainability. And so now that partnership is growing into conversations with those folks in Manila about how they can now better prepare and maybe grow seed and have their own seed libraries informed by the knowledge and wisdom from the farmers that helped them get the food they needed in the early days. So I think that the pandemic, there's a quote going around, I think it's Anurati Roy. I'm probably mispronouncing her name, which is terrible, but that the pandemic is a portal, right? The pandemic is an opportunity to do it different, right? And I think for us at Global Seed Savers, we've always believed this. It's an opportunity to go back to a simple system that has always worked, right? Which is saving seeds, which is being in community and growing local food. And that is a really powerful moment that we're in and that we're continuing to learn from. But I think it's a very poignant moment.
Sherry, I'm curious, why is it that of all the agricultural practices, why is it that seed saving resonated with you the most?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I have some seeds here at my desk as we're talking as well. Um, I think that it's been an evolution for myself. It's been an evolution for us as an organization as well. But at a very fundamental level, seeds are the starting point of all of this, right? From a seed is how we have gotten to the abundance that we have, right? And so everyone, whether you're Filipino, whether you're from the U.S., whether you're from wherever background or history you have, someone in our lineage was a part of this process, right? Because that's how we have the diversity that we have in our food system, is someone connecting with seed and loving that process. So I think that seeds are just very fundamentally essential to feeding communities and to doing this work. And then I think on a very more tactical level, seeds have always been the missing piece in our time in the Philippines, right? I mean, if I even reflect back to like my early Peace Corps days, what did the folks at Enka Farm, our founding farm, always want? Was open pollinated local seed, because all that was available in the farm supply stores was not that, was
Mm.
hybrid, was chemically treated. And so, and I think to this day, that's what's continuing. There's a rising community of organic farmers. There's a lot more people waking up to this, but the missing piece is regenerating those local seed systems. So I think it's both a very tactical, on the forefront of people's mind, very needed, and seeds are how we're going to continue to evolve and provide the sustenance that we need.
So you're passionate about sustainability and regeneration and ensuring that life continues.
Mm,
Is that what it
absolutely.
is?
And I think, I think that doesn't always mean that we have a human centric view either.
Mm.
And I think that that's something that seeds and nature certainly teach me as an individual, and I think can teach us in our work, is that we're interconnected. A value that we have at Global Seed Savers is interspecies connection. And I think so often the way that we as humans think about tackling a lot of these issues comes from a very human centric view,
Mm.
where seeds teach us to look at something from nature that frankly is way more powerful than we are. So I think I'm passionate about allowing nature to teach us new lessons that we can try to incorporate into our practices as humans to live in better balance with the earth and our surroundings.
What pains you the most about the world today?
Whew. What pains me the most? Wang, that is a big question. Um, I'm hoping you'll follow up with the positive end of that too, what also still gives me hope. But what pains me? A lot of things are coming to my head. I think if I really spend some time, I know this is supposed to be more about Global Seed Savers, but I'm the one talking, so I feel like I'm doing some introspection as well. I think I have always been someone who has a real sense of justice, and I don't mean a punitive system. I don't mean our current justice in quote systems. I mean that I think what pains me the most is these incredible imbalances that we have, um, based on super destructive belief systems and super destructive practices that have caused a lot of harm to individuals, that have caused a lot of harm to the earth, and that are continuing to cause harm. So I think what pains me the most is kind of seeing and feeling that palpable pain that the world's species, humans, unfortunately, a lot of particular groups of people are experiencing right now. I think that pains me a lot.
Despite that, of course, what inspires you the most about what you're seeing, about what you're experiencing, especially through the lens of Global Seed Savers?
Initially, the easiest answer, and the most clear and poignant answer for what inspires me the most with Global Seed Savers is the farmers,
Mm.
the actual frontliner folks doing the work. It's been a hard year for everyone, but it's been a hard year for farmers. But farmers continue to smile. Farmers continue to grow.
Mm.
Farmers continue to work through and save seeds and frankly feed the world. So, farmers are who inspires me the most in this work. And then I think, the next layer of that is our team. I get to work with wonderful, incredible people that I'm very sad to have not connected with in person in the last year, but thank you, Zoom, and the ability to do that. But I think, that inspires me. And I think, nature very much inspires me, right? For me, it's a real grounding place. And I think nature is not only going to a big mountain vista or getting to spend the morning on the river like I did today fishing. Nature can be observing some aspect of the natural world in whatever environment you happen to be in. So I think that as a human species, we have had an opportunity, and we're continuing to learn this, of how can we find these pockets of nature wherever we may be, because actually they're everywhere around us.
Mm.
And even seeds are that way. One of my seed friends here, in her presentation, she always shows a great picture of, she was like somewhere here in Denver, concrete jungle, right? We have parks and things, but in a concrete area. And what do you know? There was a wild mullein trying to grow right in the middle of the cracked concrete,
Mm.
right? And so to me, like, that's an example of nature is going to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are changing it, things are shifting, but those moments where you see a wild plant growing in the concrete is a reminder of nature's here, you know? And then in my intro, you mentioned that I'm a very proud Anta. And so, I think the next generation gives me a lot of hope. Not in the sense that, oh, it's just on them, right? Like now it's their turn to step up. No, I think we need to do this work in community. But I think we have to have some semblance of hope and deep desire to change the bad for our young people, because they're inheriting all of it, and we have a responsibility to do that together with them in a way that's going to leave it better than we found it, I hope.
Definitely. When I think about 20 to 30 years ago, it feels like there was a lack of awareness about the issues that we face in agriculture, lack of awareness about the dangers and the destruction caused by chemical farming and the advent of genetically modified organisms or GMOs. But I noticed that for the past 10 years, most especially, there has been greater awareness. There has been a growing awareness, and actually, there's a growing movement around seed saving, right? What do you think brought this about? How has that happened?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I agree with you. I think that there is a growing awareness. I think one of the things that brought it about was a pain point, was communities really being destroyed. I think our Philippine neighbors in India, the Indian farmer suicide crisis
Ah,
is has been, it's slowing, but has been exponential, right? As the influx of chemical farming has come in and the indebtedness that farmers have felt, to the point where they're drinking the toxic chemicals they've been purchasing because they can no longer pay their debt, right? So I think a lot of this has come about from the real destruction that has been seen from these bad practices. I think a more positive flip on that, and maybe this is naive, and I would welcome commentary, is that because of the shifts in the world, because of the shifts that we have seen, I think people, and in particular during a pandemic, are being forced to kind of go back to the very essential, right? And there's really nothing more essential that we share as humans than hopefully a meal together, right? Than sharing, some love, some history, some story on a plate. And that starts from the seed, that starts from the soil. So I think that it's twofold. I think that it's come from a very deep return to things that are inside of us and our histories. And I also think that it's stemmed from really real pain and people observing the negative impacts that our quote unquote industrial agriculture has brought around the world.
you mentioned about that example of India about the farmers who committed suicide. I'm not sure our listeners are aware of that. Are you okay to share a bit about that? What is the issue all about?
I can. I mean, little disclaimer, I'm not an expert, right? This is stories that I've read, documentation of this that I've learned. And to be honest, Wing, I don't know of any direct examples, but sadly, I'm certain that there probably has been in the Philippines as well. And
Mm.
um, that's a whole other subject. But, farmers around the world, and in particular in countries like the Philippines and India and other developing nations are being put in really unjust, unliberated um, situations that unfortunately, as we see in those unliberated situations, often only allow the quote unquote most powerful to succeed, right? And that is a problem. But we at Global Seed Savers believe that there's great power, and actually, farmers have the greatest wealth. because they're the ones saving the seeds and growing the seed. But in short, the issue with farmer suicides in India has been an issue of, these large biochemical corporations have come in and have started to sell their products to farmers, but it's in a debt-based system. So farmers are then indebted to those companies. And if their crops don't yield what was anticipated that year, the debt continues to go up. They continue to owe more and more. And as their farms continue to maybe not succeed, what do those companies say they need? Oh, you need more of these chemicals. And so it's just this vicious cycle of farmers having to purchase the chemicals, get more and more in debt, purchase more chemicals, more and more debt. And sadly, what was seen across the Indian nation, and I'm sure this is happening elsewhere, is the farmers reached a breaking point. I mean, really, it ignited a severe mental health crisis, right? That was intentionally perpetrated, though, I would say, by these companies. And then farmers ended up drinking those pesticides to kill themselves because they couldn't pay their debts. So that's a very simplified definition of a very complex process and people's very personal stories. So I don't want to misrepresent people's pain and suffering, but in short, that's what's been going on.
Understood. I appreciate that because right now it makes me think that that's really the reason why it's so important for farmers to really have a support system. I know that a lot of farmers really want to get out of that cycle. A lot of farmers would really love to transition to organic farming, for example, but there's not really a lot of support that farmers get. So, yeah, Global Seed Savers, Cebu Farmers Market, and Cafe, I definitely. These are some of the support systems that really help enable farmers to really make the transition happen, right? And
Absolutely.
I remember that more than a month ago, I saw this trailer of Percy and Goliath. I don't know if you've seen that. It's the story of that farmer Percy who was accused by Monsanto
Yes.
for replanting their seeds, I guess, and he won. That's why the title Percy and Goliath. Percy being an underdog and Monsanto being the proverbial giant. And I think that while we have stories like that of India, there are also some positive developments around these issues that we are dealing with.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, what you're getting at there, Wang, is a principle and a value that's very important to us at Global Seed Savers is sovereignty,
Mm,
right? I mean, we center farmers' sovereignty in all of our work. So you're absolutely right that farmers and communities need someone often by their side. They need a support system. But the end game for us is that they are restoring their own sovereign system. And seeds allow farmers to do that. I mean, we've seen that, right? Like, here's the thing, like in the last year, we haven't been able to do our field visits like we normally do.
mm,
But I can tell you, certainly when we think of bass and our community in Tublai, like I know that like this isn't going to happen, but if for some reason we could never go back to Tublai, that's not going to happen. But if it did, I know that they're good because those farmers have built a sovereign seed system for themselves. And most importantly, they're all now saving seeds on their farms. And that's what we need, right? And so it's really restoring that sovereignty. And that's what's so malicious about systems that try to take away sovereignty is it's very intentional control over something that isn't yours, right? So that's the Percy case. It's the company was trying to control the seed that blew into his yard because nature blew it in there, because
mm,
we in this country have allowed the patenting of life. We've allowed the patenting of seeds.
mm.
So I think that what we are about is restoring that sovereign system, which at the end removes us from it as well, right? Most importantly, who's the sovereign there? It should be the farmers, and that's what we're trying to work towards.
Yeah. It's just fascinating how the guests so far in this podcast are so interconnected, because I remember that in my podcast with Asha, when I ask her why she's doing what she's doing, the essence of why is really also all about sovereignty. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, yeah. We're all very connected. Yep.
I know. Yeah. And Sherry, can you share with us what are the upcoming activities of Global Seed Savers? Any activities or events or programs that our listeners can participate in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are at an exciting stage of growth as an organization. We actually just onboarded 2 new staff members, so
Hmm.
we're still a small but mighty team, but very excited to see the need for more support growing. This isn't fully launched yet, but I want to cue it up for your listeners. Historically, our model is we do our seed school program, which is a technical training program. And then we work with those communities to help them establish a seed library. And as we are getting more and more demand for those services, 2 things that we're really excited to be launching. One is hopefully a technical training, training of trainers program.
Hmm.
It'll be virtual because we're all still navigating different lockdown situations around the Philippines.
Hmm.
But a training of trainers so that all of these community partners that want to bring seed school to their community can jump on, can learn the curriculum, can gain some confidence and more skills in how to facilitate that, and then can go out and train their own communities, right? And then the other thing that we're not launching yet, but I want to cue it up, is we're talking about building a membership model where all of these different players in the Philippines that want to get more involved. Maybe that's another NGO, maybe that's a farmers association, maybe it's a local government, can become a member of Global Seed Savers Philippines. With that membership, there will be a fee, but then they get access to a menu of opportunities. It'll include seed school. It'll include a seed library kit. It'll include some starter seeds. It'll include educational materials. And it will also hopefully convene an annual gathering of all of the members to exchange ideas, to have learning opportunities. And so, we're really setting our sights, Wang, on being the coalition builder, right? As our work is growing, as the demand for what we're doing is growing, we want to be able to help support communities in uplifting their seed saving, but then again, allow them to be the ones to take it to the next step. So I think that those are really wonderful ways to engage. We will be kind of revamping some of our marketing and whatnot, but if you go to our website now, globalseedsavers.org, you can sign up for our newsletters. Please follow us on social media. That's a great way to stay in touch and stay engaged with what we're doing as we're getting ready to launch some of these new plans.
These kinds of participation, like the membership, is one of the ways in which we can help the farmers and in which we can support the work that you do. Are there other ways that people can help support the Global Seed Savers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of ways. As the executive director, I would be remiss in not making a call for financial support. So, we are always grateful for donations of any size in any currency. We do have Philippine accounts, and if folks feel compelled and excited to support the farmers, we can get you information about how to give directly in the Philippines. You can also give on our website. I think one of the best ways you can support the work yourself is to learn more about seed saving yourself. So if this compelled you, I would encourage you to go to our social sites, to join us for a future seed school, and become a part of our community. And whether that means you grow or plant your own seed, that's okay. But to educate yourself and become part of the advocacy is a great way to stay engaged.
Any final message for our listeners?
Well, just first, I mean, thank you, Wang, for the opportunity. It's always lovely to get to see you and to talk with you. And we're grateful to be working in the Philippines. We're grateful to be seeing the demand and the community around the importance of this work continuing to grow. and we are excited to be able to continue to play an important role in all of that growth. And as we're all still navigating the pandemic and the other challenges that communities and individuals are facing, we hope that we can continue to be a support and a little bit of hope, like seeds teach us to be hopeful, as we continue to navigate where the world is at. So I think those are my final words.
Wonderful. Before we end, I'd like to maybe share that the reason why I called the podcast the Seed Podcast, and that my registered business is also called Seeds of Transformation, is because the metaphor of the seed is really something special to me. I look at it as a metaphor for limitless potential. Um, it is the beginning of life, and it is about sustenance. So that's what it means to me. And I know that you touched on this a bit already, but maybe you can also share what it is really that the seed mean to you. And I know
Mhm.
that you have seeds out there. Can you show them to me?
Sure,
What are
sure.
those seeds?
This is a beautiful corn variety. I'm
Ah,
not going to remember the exact name of it, but it was given to me by our mentor, Bill McDorman from
mm,
the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, who actually came to the Philippines in 2016 and held a seed school in Baguio with us.
mhm.
And so this sits on my altar. And then I just have kind of a bowl of other seeds. I have some beans, I have some glass gem corn. Yeah. Um, something that we talk a lot about at GSS and GSSP, and that I also on a personal level really believe, is seeds are the past, present, and future. Because as I said earlier, seeds carry knowledge. Seeds carry, like what Bill, our mentor, said, they're little time capsules, right?
No.
So someone grew this bean, right? And someone before them grew that bean, and somehow this bean has now landed with me, right? And so it carries all of that past, present, and then the hope of it is that we can replant it and it will lead us into the future.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you find this valuable, don't forget to hit subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to know more about me and my work, you can check out seedsoftransformation.ph.